associate software engineer in the platform engineering team. So I will be talking about how you can scale your GraphQL APIs and make it more performant using different caching capabilities and few of the scalability options. So first of all, what is GraphQL? So GraphQL is basically a query language, first made specifically by Facebook. And what it gives GraphQL the power is that it lets the users define what they want as a result, rather than having the server-defined responses. So there are basically two kind of contrasts here. So there's GraphQL versus REST. So in the field of data fetching, what you can do, what GraphQL provides the user is the power of specifying the fields of what they want and choosing the response of the fields only what they need, rather than the REST, in which the server determines the responses and the users don't have the power to query what they want. REST APIs generally also have the problem of overfetching. What does it mean is that the data provided by the server is generally more than what you need. Well, that's something that GraphQL specifically solves, because GraphQL lets the users define what they want rather than having the server determined responses. GraphQL also has this specific ability of combining a lot of data sources together and let you have all the responses, all data from the one field itself. And so you don't need to care about whether the data is coming from, you just specify what you need. But on the REST APIs, you need to scale, like where do I need to query, where do I get what data from, and how do we combine. Well, you can have that another as a data point, but then you need to change the whole REST API architecture. So these are a few of the examples of GraphQL versus REST. So on the left side, you can see like the GraphQL client specifies exactly what the data they need, and in the responses, they get exactly what the field they've specified. So they get only ID, URL, and the comments of the assets belonging to this particular album ID. While on the REST side, as you can see, let's say they do a GET request to the /albums URL. So they get all the data from the server. Like here, they get the IDs, they get the URLs. Even though they didn't ask for it, they might not need it. But yeah, it will be on the network layer. It will slow the responses for sure. Well, with all that good things about GraphQL, it does come with few of its bottlenecks. So one of them is the expensive query execution. Well, what happens in GraphQL is that you write your query, and then you get the result of the query. But as you can see in this example, let's say this is the schema. On the left-hand side, you can see the schema. So if you do a query on the musician, you will do one network call to get the list of all the musicians. But as you can see, they also have the albums subquery in that parent query. And let's say the resolvers do another network request to get all the albums belonging to a particular musician. So these calls and other network calls. So there are a total of 1 plus n network calls. Well, this does cause a problem because the resolving albums, which might be a very expensive task, and causing this much network calls will slow the responses, and obviously a bad user experience. The GraphQL also gives the power to the user to determine the queries, but as you can see, like users can have a lot of complex queries. There is no limit on the users what they will give to the GraphQL. So to get rid of it, you need to have some kind of cost computation or maybe some depth limits for it. Now, there are a few caching challenges as well in GraphQL. So like in the case of REST APIs, you have the URL, and you can easily cache the responses belonging to a particular URL. But in GraphQL, that's not the case because the queries itself are very dynamic. For example, you can see query 1 here. You ask for ID and name. And in the query 2, you ask for ID, name, and email. So even if the list of the users belong to this same set of user, first time you will get only ID and name in the responses, but in the second time you will get ID, name, and email. So whole response is of different structure, hence you won't be able to cache it well. another caching limitation with GraphQL is that most of the CDNs cache based on the URLs. So let's say they consider a particular URL as a unique endpoint and then they cache the response for it. But in GraphQL, there is only one URL and you do most of the post requests to it. So your response depends on the query what you send. But it causes restriction with the CDNs that whether they are able to query, whether they are able to pass that query and do caching pretty well or not. Well, there are few workarounds for it, like you can use the persisted queries as well. In case of persisted queries, what happens is that you can define predetermined queries, and you can store the responses to that queries in a separate cache. But in this case, you won't let the users define their queries. Rather, you give them the correct hash belonging to that query, and then the user asks just for that query's cache. There are also a few of the specialized GraphQL CDNs which do pass the queries and are able to cache the responses, but they are not very much used. So there is also a trade-off between granularity and efficiency in caching. So response caching is like a pretty simple topic. It is very easy to use. You can just configure some Redis cache or some in-memory cache for it. But then you also need to have a good balance between the field level caching and the entity caching. Well, we will talk a lot more about these concepts ahead, but you need to strike a balance between the performance and the ease of maintainability of the things. Well, there are few caching strategies in GraphQL, like there are specifically 3 I've been mentioned here, but if you know something else, then sure, you can talk. So there is one, is the response caching. Well, these kind of caching do get implemented. These are mainly done on the CDN levels. And this type of caching mainly works in those areas where the queries are predetermined and they don't change a lot. Let's say, for example, you have some docs website. So let's say you have a lot of predetermined queries belonging to a particular endpoint. So these queries doesn't change. So you can for sure cache the responses for these kind of queries. And so you need to be aware about the use case specifically in this case. So whether your data changes a lot, whether your query changes a lot, that has a huge contribution in determining whether you can use this type of caching or not. Well, during this time, using this type of caching also, you must keep in mind that the cache control headers are set accordingly. You need to keep in mind the time to live for the caches. And one more important thing is that if you are using response caching, then you need to be aware about which fields are private or public, because you cannot, for sure, you cannot cache the private fields in the CDNs and all. So it might be possible that you are doing some kind of authentication and then giving the response back to the user, but it might contain some private data as well. So you surely don't want to cache those private data. So you need to have some kind of directives and all for this thing. Okay. So next is the field level caching. So the response caching is like caching the whole response, but what about if you cache only a particular field belonging to a particular result? For example, as you can see here, in the previous example, we had these albums. What you can do is like, you can have a lot of queries asking for a particular musician's album. So instead of resolving this album field for a particular musician, you can just cache the set of albums for that particular musician. So whenever this query for the particular musician will come, your GraphQL API won't call the backend data source for that albums. Rather, it will use the cache to give you that result. Yeah, so most of the times these can be implemented using data loaders. So we will talk a bit about data loaders ahead, but data loaders are kind of a tool which you can use to batch the requests together, and it also helps in caching the particular field. So what it does is that when you find a particular field belonging to a type, it uses the key for that particular field and then uses it to store it some kind of cache or in a hash map, or you can configure your own in-memory cache or maybe Redis even. So that's field level caching. Now, the third is the entity level caching. So entity level caching is like a bit more complex thing, because in the response caching, you cache the whole response. In field level caching, you cache the fields, but in entity caching, you don't cache the results as much. You cache the things which you need to calculate results. Like, for example, let's say you have a list of something which doesn't change this a lot. So what you can do is, like, you can simply cache those things in your GraphQL, in memory, in memory caching, and you can do all the complex calculations on it, and then calculate, and then give the results on it. So this kind of caching is mostly implemented in those areas in which you need a lot of complex computations, and you need to do that locally, because it improves the performance in that case a lot. But to like maintain this cache, you need to have some schedulers repeating it again, refreshing it again and again. So that's kind of a bit more complex here. And you also need to have a good knowledge about what fields you need to calculate about, and what fields are being used for more and more calculations. So calculating, caching those fields which are used for complex computation is much more beneficial. Now, there are few ways to scale GraphQL APIs as well. So GraphQL API's performance depends a lot on how the resolvers are being written. Resolvers have this annoying problem of 1 plus n queries, as we discussed earlier. So there is a one of the concept, like you can use data loaders for it. What data loaders does is that it doesn't causes n requests to resolve different objects of a particular query. It takes the key for those particular objects, batches it together, and creates one network call to the data source. And what it does is that it gets the result for all those keys and then maps it back to the GraphQL original response. One more good thing that data loaders does is that it also uses caching. So by default, data loader use hash maps. You can use your own caching implementations there, so that's on you. But like, data loaders don't send the key belonging to a particular cached product back to the data source, and it uses the cache to get those things. So it reduces the size of the network calls to the database, and that improves a lot of performance. So another concept that also comes here is federation in GraphQL. So GraphQL schema can grow a lot. They can be huge in size. One of the good ways to manage such a huge schema is to break those down in multiple microservices. So this is some kind of microservices architecture where you break your whole supergraph in smaller subgraphs, and these smaller subgraphs can be maintained by different teams, can be written in different languages, can be implemented in various different ways, having multiple different sources of data, and can be scaled independently. So what you can do is maintain these subgraphs and then use this key, which will expose their schema. You can have these schema combined together and then generate a supergraph schema, which will be, the supergraph will be responsible only for maybe getting the request and sending it to the correct subgraph for its resolving. You can also implement your authentication at the supergraph level. So supergraph is mainly responsible for getting the request in and giving it to the subgraphs. So it makes the whole GraphQL APIs ecosystem much more simpler and easy to manage, and also gives the teams the flexibility to use their own tech stack. One of the ways to scale the APIs is also to use cost analysis. And so GraphQL queries can be like very complex in nature. These resolvers can be doing a lot of computation in the background and can then fetching you the result. So each query, because each query can have a lot of computational load on the server. And because of this, you must need to be able to calculate the cost of a particular query. Because remember, GraphQL queries are user-defined queries at the end. And the users can query literally for anything. So to get rid of that and like kind of protect your server from getting overloaded, you need to somehow calculate the cost of calculating the whole query and limit this cost so that you can prevent the server from DOS and DDoS kind of attacks as well. You can do it mainly using the cost directive maybe, or you can also use some kind of depth limit for a particular query because to save your kind of servers, yeah. So the thing is, there's no single way of scaling your APIs. It basically depends a lot on your particular use case. So you can combine all these strategies together, like let's say you have a subgraph, so you might be having some kind of dynamic static queries which you already know. So you can maybe use persistent queries for them and get the hashes and get the queries result from the response caching. And maybe resolving a particular field might be very expensive. In that case, you can use field level caching and just cache those responses, but just keep in mind like you refresh those responses again. And for all the other purposes, entity level caching is kind of a very good approach because it stays in memory and you can have a lot of control over it. And you can prevent a lot of network calls to the backend because it's like computing everything locally. So that's kind of all. Any questions? All right. Yeah.
Do you have performance stats on all those different caching and the federation especially? Like federation sounds more expensive from a query latency perspective.
Well, but federation also gives you the ability to scale things well because you can scale each subgraph well.
I get that. Do you have metrics? I'm just curious. No. Do you have any kind of comparison? Have you tried that out? Oh. Have you tried it out to see what those different caching versus scalability combinations would result in?
Not right now specifically. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you can do a lot of like authentication based on a supergraph if you follow the federation. You can have your authentication at the supergraph level. You can use some kind of SSO tokens at that level. And then because like supergraph will be the only entry point to all of the subgraphs, so you can authenticate everything there. So.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So my question is that you mentioned the difference between REST and GraphQL, and I see the benefits here, but the downside can be the protection of your data sources. So is there a way for doing some rate limiting of your endpoint?
Yeah, so rate limiting can, well, you can even use the cost directives for rate limiting. Like, let's say you have tokens assigned to each of your users. What you can do is maybe assign a rate limit, a cost limit to those users, like whether they can have a total cost of 100 units, let's say, in 5 minutes. So that's kind of a rate limiting approach you can adopt for sure. It can also be on the depth. So you can have this cost computation based on different concepts, maybe cost or maybe depth limits. So that's kind of approach you can follow. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Questions? So any more questions?